Hello, everyone. Hello, every day we talk about in this weekend with Martin Arostegui. Subscribe for all video about international law, security, compliance, anti-corruption, and business. Now we have Martin Arostegui today in this podcast. How every week with Martin is the most important journalist. He's especially in military and intelligence matters, who has covered at the key international conflict we are now deploying in Ukraine. He has worked for Voice of America, Wall Street Journal, the Daily Telegraph, the Washington Times, CNN, Fox News, and United Press International, and France 24. He's author a very interesting book about the military special operation called Twilight Warriors. Thank you all. Thank you, Martin. How are you? What is news?
Hi, Christian. How are you? Thank you for having me on board. It's always a pleasure. Well, I think let's start with as usual, a brief update on what has happened in Ukraine, although it's hard to make anything in Ukraine very brief these days. But essentially, things haven't changed that much since Putin's anticlimactic speech last Monday, in which he let down a lot of people who thought he was going to make all kinds of nuclear threats and pledges to destroy Ukraine and so on. He made a rather low-key speech, possibly reflecting his own coming to grips, his own acceptance of the reality of the situation in Ukraine, which is very, which is not good at all. I mean, it's hardly something to the situation of his army there, and in terms of the gains he's made and what the prospects are hardly anything to boast about, and hardly anything upon which to launch any great pronouncements about. So in that sense, it's hopeful because it seems that to some extent Putin has accepted the situation. However, it appears that what military analysts are deducing from Russia's actions is that they're far yet from giving up. Possibly simply as a way of keeping his army, keeping the loyalty of his army, of his top brass. The Russians have opted for a policy of attrition, a classic military attritional policy, attritional tactics, strategy of artillery followed by large tank and infantry offensives in areas which they're disputing with the Ukrainian forces in eastern and southern Ukraine, which are few, I may add. I mean, they're nowhere near any of the major population centers of Ukraine. They're advanced towards Odessa in the south. Odessa in the south is checked. There seems to be absolutely no hope of them ever mounting any new offensive on Kiev. And the city of Kharkiv, which was the last city they were besieging, they've been pushed back from there as well, hopelessly pushed back. I mean, to the point that they cannot attack Kiev anymore with artillery, certainly, and possibly occasional missiles. But Russian activity around Kharkiv has diminished considerably. So all Russia would really be able to do is hold its own and maybe make some slight gains around Donetsk and Luhansk, which are the only regions, the only city, the only towns over which they exercise effective control. And Mariupol in the south as well, which is very near Crimea. About 3 towns, basically, three towns of maybe a few 100,000 people each, on which Russia exercises effective control. They've pretty much given up on taking any of the major cities. Mariupol, I assume they're going to take it at some point, although the Azov battalion continues resisting in the steelworks. And but even if that falls, I mean, it's, again, I mean, in terms of urban control, that city is relatively small. We're talking about a population of a few 100,000. So we have the Russians pretty much hanging on to having a hard time, in fact, hanging on to what they have. And the Ukrainians threatening perhaps, or in a position possibly to threaten a major offensive to take back territory, take back yet more territory. If these $40 billion of military aid, which is just passed by which is in the process of being passed by the U.S. Congress, over some objections from some of the more isolationist senators who think that the U.S. is giving too much to Ukraine and becoming overcommitted, which is a point. But anyway, it seems that aid is on the way, and they're going to get it one way or another. And once they have that, I think all bets are off, because I think then they would be in a position possibly to push back against the areas that Russia holds inside Ukraine. Again, I mean, some would say this brings you to a very dangerous situation, because the Russians feel they're really going to be pushed out of Ukraine altogether, and they will have no leverage upon which to negotiate a peace deal with Zelensky, with the Ukrainians, or with NATO, or with Europe, which I think is probably what they're aiming at. They may, at that point, who knows? I mean, at that point, maybe they could opt to use nuclear weapons. I mean, it's a possibility. If they feel they're being pushed into a corner, into a situation hopeless on the ground, that they could resort to weapons of mass destruction. Very, very nasty tactics of massive, which would bring about massive casualties and destruction. So it's in this vein, I think, that Europe, they are pushing, I think, for some sort of negotiated. The German Chancellor Scholz has been on the phone with Putin and Zelensky. And I believe that he is very much pushing for a negotiated solution. I think Europe is very much in favor of this. The French have said that Zelensky should even concede territory in Ukraine to the Russians. That's what the French President Macron has said publicly. And I think this is probably Europe's position. Of course, Europe is in a very difficult position. They cannot come across. I mean, they're pretending to be united in their effort to cut off imports of Russian gas and oil, but they haven't really. They're not united on that. There's tremendous resistance to that. Certain states say that their economies would collapse if they did that, and it's doubtful that they would arrive at any such unified decision for a definitive cutoff of Russian oil and gas at any time in the near future. I doubt it, and the fact that they're not able to do this, which of course would deprive Russia of needed revenue to continue their war effort, which is costing them something like $900 million a day, according to some estimate. Then I think they would be. They have to push for a negotiated solution. And Zelensky has made noises to the effect that he is prepared, that he wants to negotiate, that he wants to meet Putin, and he wants to arrive at some sort of negotiation. So again, I think probably things point towards that. We don't know what effect, if this massive amount of military aid, $40 billion in military aid, is released by the United States. We don't know to what extent that will that will allow Ukraine to continue its war effort and even push the Russians back, which, of course, as I say, could lead to a very dangerous situation. And that's more or less where things stand right now, the way things look. It's interesting that, again, we have to take into consideration the fact that even as Europe pushes for alternative sources of energy, alternative sources of oil and gas, whose main source would seem to be Africa, because the United States refuses to make any significant, to come out of its green policy to make any new significant oil exploration and development inside the United States. They refuse to get off this policy of heavily restricting oil and gas exploitation in the United States. So they're not in a position to greatly increase Europe's oil and gas supplies at a time when they're asking them to get off the Russian supplies. A policy that I find totally irrational, but anyway, that's just the way it is. And they're looking towards Africa. Europe is looking towards Africa to increase for additional oil and gas supplies. Italy, in fact, signed an agreement with Algeria to increase its supply of gas to Italy through a pipeline across the Mediterranean. And there's talk of building a trans-African pipeline from Nigeria to Algeria and possibly to Morocco. Of course, this would be subject, I mean, the political risk involved in any such project. And we're talking about projects that would take years to terminate. I mean, major engineering projects would take years to execute in the best of circumstances. Would go through areas which are controlled by jihadi guerrillas in Niger, possibly in Mali, and where, of course, the Russian Wagner group is also present, as we know, where Russia has a lot of covert presence and covert control and influence over the local government. So the idea that a substantial African replacement for Russian gas could be engineered at any time soon, especially with Russia and jihadi guerrillas in a position to sabotage it, is quite frankly unrealistic. You know, Christian, what comes to me, I mean, something that a feature that is becoming apparent to me in this invasion of Ukraine since the start, and which connects to other international intrigues that the Russians have been involved in, is this apparent collusion between a corrupt military, which is obviously connected through corrupt deals with the massive with Russian organized crime, which we all know has a presence in the Kremlin, in the figure of Yevgeny Prigozhin, one of Putin's top aides, who has been personally involved in conducting all kinds of covert activities for Russia, financing them and perhaps even pushing them. You know, it stands out that Putin was lured into this invasion by faulty intelligence provided by an intelligence service, equally a corrupt intelligence, obviously a very adventurous, but corrupt and seemingly incompetent intelligence service. And his corrupt military, which is obviously very much in bed or is very close to Russia's organized crime syndicates. And something that's come to light, I think, over the past few days is that one of Russia's projects in the years prior to the Ukraine invasion was an effort to back the separatist movement in Spain's region of Catalonia. I covered the independence bid in Catalonia for the VOA and for the Washington Times quite closely, and it was apparent to me at the time that there was quite a bit of Russian involvement. A lot of a tremendous disinformation and propaganda effort conducted through these troll farms that were being operated from within Russia, from properties owned and companies, internet research companies owned by members of organized crime, including Prigozhin, which put out a massive amount of propaganda, disinformation, and false information to back the separatists, cause, to boost the separatist cause internationally and within Catalonia, through hundreds, tens of thousands of false Twitter and Facebook and other social media accounts. That came to light to me. It was proven beyond a doubt that there was a direct connection between these and Russia. As well as the presence in Catalonia at the time of the referendum on independence, and the illegal referendum. The Spanish government refused to recognize the results, and the Catalan separatists hailed it as a victory, a referendum which less than 50% of the Catalans had voted, because obviously the pro-independence people voted and therefore was won by the independence people, and they hailed that as a decisive victory. There was the presence also in Catalonia at the time, which involved and the independence movement involved the organization of violent groups, violent fringe organizations, Catalan terrorist type urban guerrilla type organizations that were operating on the level of almost certainly using political violence, very threatening, very intimidating with physical violence. Some of the pro-Spanish figures in the Catalan government, and even evolved into the creation of a terrorist attack group that were prepared to use bombs. They were prepared to use explosives and that kind of thing, and some sabotage operations, which were nipped in the bud by the Guardia Civil just in time before the operation could actually take place. There was the presence in Catalonia of elements of the Russian GRU. There was a general of the GRU which went into Catalonia at about the time of the referendum, General Denis Sergeyev of the GRU, which commanded a covert action unit of the GRU, a special covert action unit called Unit 29155. And he was in Catalonia at the time of the referendum. It's been traced there by several, his passport has been traced there through Interpol and several European intelligence agencies. And this coincided with another high-level Russian operative that whose presence in Catalonia and meeting with key independence figures, including the leader of the independence movement, Carlos Puigdemont, who appears to be a pretty high-level figure of Russia's intelligence services, called Nikolai Zadovnikov, who has been identified as someone close, who has operated close with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, and is part of an operative of the sort of Putin inner circle inside the Kremlin. People involved in sort of freelance organized crime type operations involving or with the backing of the intelligence services and the Russian government. And this meeting apparently has been confirmed by other media, by various media, which took place at about the time of the referendum, when this GRU covert operations specialist was in the area, between him and Puigdemont, in which Zadovnikov promised military support for an independence struggle. And really exorbitant, unbelievable amount. Obviously, there was some this was a con job. The Russians couldn't possibly come up with this kind of money. $500 million in Bitcoin. Billion to support the independence movement. Of course, nothing in this was ever produced. I think that they did things like send photographs of briefcases full of money to make the Catalans believe that they had all the money. Just stuff like that. I think there's some one Bitcoin worth $10,000, something like that, to prove that they had access, kind of thing. But apparently, the idea was to set up, and perhaps this is why they promised this kind of money, set up Catalonia as a major center for the laundering and moving of black money. A major center of Bitcoin transactions, a hub of Bitcoin activity. This was their vision for an independent Catalonia, right? And they communicated this to Puigdemont. So
that's really true.
Yeah, the Russians obviously had plans there. They had plans. They liked the idea. Putin, I know, at one time made a speech in which he didn't back Catalonian separatism, but he said openly, that Russia was supporting it as a way of getting back, that there was support in Russia, for the independence movement because of NATO support for the independence of Kosovo and some of the Balkan states, whose separation from Serbia, which is the close Russian ally, NATO and the United States and Western powers back in the 1990s. It was a way of getting back at the West, or having back secessionist movements in the Balkan states, from what was the former Serbia, but was former Yugoslavia. So yes, I mean there was definite Russian involvement. So when you tie all this together, you know, the involvement of Russian organized crime, a corrupt military, and an adventurous and seemingly rather competent, delusional intelligence service, we have the makings, I think, of the disastrous decision-making that went into the invasion of Ukraine. Christian, are you hearing me?
Sorry, I find the photo of the. Sorry, I can't hear you. I was finding this photo about the Russian intermediate of Putin in Catalonia. This is the
yes,
the photography. Yeah.
That man. You know, Russia also they also opened up. It's funny, at the time, one of the other things they did at the time of the independence referendum was that the Republic of North Ossetia, which is this puppet state that Russia set up in Georgia after they invaded in 2008, I believe. The brief war they had with Georgia, in which they set up this separatist Republic of North Ossetia, in what had been part of Georgia. They set up a consulate in Catalonia, in Barcelona. Obviously, as a way of, you know, covertly backing, maybe financing, channeling Russian activities in the area. And the Venezuelans were also involved. The Venezuelans were involved in the troll system. They backed the Russian disinformation media, social media efforts at these massive disinformation efforts conducted in Twitter and social media. A lot of trolls also were being launched from Venezuela, while these fake accounts came from Venezuela. And and a very high level, Venezuela appointed a very high level member of the government, a top operative of the Chavez, of the Maduro regime, who had organized the political. He was one of the main political organizers of the various referendums in Venezuela. He was an expert in electronic voting and all that kind of thing, and they assigned him to the Venezuelan consulate in Barcelona, where there was also a Venezuelan military attaché involved. So they were also highly involved. I mean, he participated in meetings with some of the Venezuelan separatist groups. So they weren't, you know, they did it quite openly. So it was obviously a major Russian effort to back Catalan independence at the time. And who knows? I mean, if the independence movement had succeeded, aside from perhaps Catalonia becoming a center of Russian intelligence and black money financial activities, it would have also been a center possibly from which they could have supported the invasion of Ukraine, and perhaps conducted operations, sabotage, or intelligence and paramilitary type operations into Europe to counter European support for Zelensky and the Ukrainian government, had they succeeded in establishing a pro-Russian separatist government in Catalonia. So it's we have an interesting confluence of interest there, without doubt.
Venezuela work with Smartmatic is the company who do the referendum. Is there a similar company in Catalonia, Smartmatic?
No, not Smartmatic. No, I don't think Smartmatic has any presence in Spain at all. No, but I'm saying that a top operative of the Venezuelan government, who I think was involved in contracting the services of Smartmatic to manage the electronic voting system in Venezuela, was appointed to the Venezuelan diplomatic mission in Barcelona.
Oh,
That's what I'm saying.
that's interesting. Venezuela, well, Russia and Venezuela have interest in Catalonia. It's obviously in this moment. The lottery money or for crypto money, all cream in the money. We talk about the Russia. With the sanction now, we can move the ruble and go to move to Bitcoins. Is the new money for the lottery money. So why you know about the in this case about the prosecutor, about the Paraguay prosecutor's killing in Colombia with girlfriend in visit to Cartagena, the Indias? Some connection with the Russia or some connection with the criminal organization international?
No connection. No connection with Russia. At least none that can possibly be. No. That's I don't think there's any connection there. At least none that we know of. There apparently could be. Well, this is rumored. And it's not confirmed. It's just one of the theories that is being circulated in Colombia. Is that the killing may have been ordered by a Hezbollah, a drug dealer linked to Hezbollah, called Nader Mohamad Farhat.
Farhat.
Yeah. Who operated in the triple frontier of Paraguay.
True border, yeah.
Frontier in Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil, which is of course a major triple border area, which is a major drug trafficking and money laundering center, and was arrested some time ago. Well, actually, a couple of years ago, I believe, not that long ago, in an operation commanded or ordered by Marcelo Pecci, the prosecutor that was just assassinated in Colombia, in coordination with the DEA. And he was extradited. This Hezbollah dealer was extradited to the United States, where he's right now serving prison time. And it's speculated that he, which formed an integral part of the very large Hezbollah drug trafficking network in Latin America, which is now centered in Venezuela, as well as Paraguay. Ordered the assassination of Pecci. He's the second high-level Paraguayan prosecutor to be killed, to be shot by drug trafficking activity. And the last one was hit from a helicopter by a 50 caliber machine gun. I think it perforated 40 times, I believe. When the process was conducting a raid, when he conducted a raid in a warehouse where there was supposed to be a major drug find, he and his law enforcement in Paraguay, he and his law enforcement team were ambushed and shot at from the air by a helicopter using heavy caliber weapons, heavy caliber machine guns. And him and a lot of the team were killed. You know, it was a sting operation. It was a trap. This was the previous prosecutor to be assassinated in Paraguay. And now we have Marcelo Pecci, assassinated while he was on vacation in Colombia with his wife, in obviously a very well-planned hit job, and which indicates the transnational capabilities of the drug mafia. The Paraguayan in Colombia were on vacation, and that's what they got. That's what they killed him. Maybe because they felt he was more vulnerable there, or maybe it was to send a message to say, you're not safe anywhere, and anyone collaborates against us anywhere is going to be hit. We don't know what exactly the reason was for hitting in Colombia. But anyway, it's indicative of the transnational capabilities of the organizations. As I understand, Pecci was investigated, or had investigated, or was in the process of prosecuting networks involved in the transport of Bolivian cocaine, where cocaine production has grown massively over the past 2 years, down the Paraná River to ports in Argentina and Brazil, and possibly out to ports in the Atlantic and Africa, directly from Paraguayan ports, Asunción and Rosario, I think. Anyway, they are loaded. The drugs are loaded in these barges which float downriver where there are no controls and offloaded onto ships that take them to ports and other ports in South America or across the Atlantic directly to Europe. And a massive amount of drug traffic is moving in this way. Pecci was on top of it, and that's why they got it. That's why they assassinated him. He was on the verge of uncovering or moving against what has become perhaps one of the newest and biggest routes, drug trafficking routes out of South America today, out of Paraguay, which is increasingly, again, after a while in which drug traffic and money laundering activity there had seemed to have been controlled, is again becoming an area of massive money laundering, drug money laundering center. In fact, I think, Christian, you told me some time ago when we were investigating this Panamanian company, BP Securities.
Yep.
That was seemed to be involved in all kinds of dark money transactions. That the Paraguayan stock market had suddenly become, a lot of money was suddenly being traded in the Paraguayan stock market. There's a lot of money going into the Paraguayan stock market. A stock market which until now had previously been virtually non-existent, but which bankers like, some people out of Panama and so on had virtually created a stock market there, undoubtedly serving, working with laundered drug money. So it seems that Paraguay is again becoming a center of drug traffic and money laundering activity, and that Marcelo Pecci, is the latest victim of the drug mafias.
He's a victim of the transnational crime. We operate Bolivian drugs, continue Paraguay, Paraná, and Paraguay to associate with all crimes. Is very, very difficult for this moment in this zone in triple border, no? If possible, you talk about the connection with the mafia, Africa, Arabia. You talk about Mohamad, who is the involvement in this moment? Mohamad?
Mohamad, Nader Mohamad Farhat, the HEZBOLLAH
Mohamad Bala.
Drug trafficking kingpin who's now in prison in the United States. Yes, well, it's speculated that he's the one who ordered Pecci's killing, because he was arrested. He was moving between Colombia and Paraguay, and he was arrested, I think, under orders from Pecci. And that's why it's speculated that he ordered a hit on Pecci.
Yeah, I remember the other podcast we talk about the Hezbollah president, the troop border. Is the recent connection is a good reason for talk about now with the kill the prosecutor, is the connection with Hezbollah. It's true. It's very true. Very interesting. I'll talk about now in this moment.
Well, I would say, I've repeated it many times before. Hezbollah's presence in Latin America is growing. The Mexican authorities report links between talks between Hezbollah as well as other Middle Eastern terrorist organizations and some of the Mexican cartels. There's talk of some of the links, talks that have been taking place between some of the Salvadoran gangs and 13 and so forth with Al Qaeda, some of the Middle Eastern terrorist organizations, and of course Hezbollah is present. It forms an integral part of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. One of his top ministers, two of his ministers are top ministers, top men of the regime, are Hezbollah operatives. They've been named, accused, indicted by the U.S. government as running, laundering drug trafficking proceeds into Hezbollah accounts. And these are people who have served in very top positions in the Venezuelan government. So Hezbollah is all over the place in Latin America. And my fear is that at some point, all this is going to evolve all this money, all these operatives, all this capability is going to result or lead to a major Hezbollah attack inside the United States. Okay, we know they did this many years ago in Argentina, where they blew up the Israeli embassy as well as the major Jewish community center in Buenos Aires. And I fear that they're probably, killing hundreds of people, or over 100 people anyway. And I fear that this is going to happen at some point in the U.S.
Hezbollah, the original Hezbollah is Iran. Iran create this criminal organization, Hezbollah.
Hezbollah it's called the Party of God. Okay, that was the original name. That's the actual name, the Party of God. It began in Lebanon when the Party of God, Hezbollah, launched a truck bombing against the barracks of multinational forces which had been landed in Lebanon to try to deal with the civil war, to support the Lebanese government against radical Islamic and other groups participating in the civil war, and which presented a major threat to Israel at the time. And the Hezbollah conducted attacks against the French and American components, the two main components of these multinational force. They blew up barracks housing the U.S. Marines, killing 250 Marines, and also as well as the stronghold of the French Foreign Legion, the deuxième rep there, the French Foreign Legion parachute regiment that was also there. And it was later, the attempts were later traced to Iran. Iran funded the operations, and from that moment on, Iran has increasingly taken over Hezbollah. And Iran has become very intertwined with Iran's Revolutionary Guard, with the Quds force, which virtually directly funds, arms, and facilitates Hezbollah operations all over the world. As I may add, the Wagner Group is also beginning to do. They've also become involved with Hezbollah as a result of the way they operated together in Syria, in the Syrian civil war, backing Assad's government in Syria, which also became a backer of Hezbollah along with the Iranians. And I think the link between Hezbollah and Iran became evident in Argentina in the Buenos Aires attacks, when it's been well established that the Hezbollah cell that launched the truck bombings against the Israeli targets in Buenos Aires, they got their intelligence from the Iranians, they got some of their funding from the Iranians, and their direction from Iranian intelligence officers inside the Iranian embassy, who soon left, who left Buenos Aires soon after the bombings. So the links between the two, especially the transnational operations, are very, very, very clear and very established.
That's true. That's in this moment. This picture is the principal responsible, Assad Ahmad Barakat, who live in Foz do Iguaçu. He's the principal accused for the AMIA. You remember the case? We talk about the AMIA, the attack, terrorist attack in Buenos Aires. This is the principal suspect in this moment. Who live in Foz do Iguaçu.
The FBI managed to get him, and other members of the Hezbollah cell that participated in the AMIA attack, the Jewish community center that was blown up in Buenos Aires, actually took asylum in Venezuela, where they were protected by a Venezuelan attorney that went on to serve in the first government of Hugo Chavez, who actually still serves. He's still Tariq William Saab. He is still, quite recently, was Attorney General of the Venezuelan government. And he's the one who defended and protected the Hezbollah operatives that took asylum in Venezuela and arranged for an escape outside of Trump government. Obviously, arranged an escape.
A similar case with the Nisman, prosecutor of Buenos Aires, who investigated the CATALONIA. He died. He died
Well, Nisman was investigating the possible collusion or efforts by the Argentine government to cover up Iranian involvement in AMIA, supposedly as a way of continuing to conduct economic deals, business deals with Iran. He was named special prosecutor by the Argentine Congress, and he was about to release his findings when he was found dead in the bathtub of his Buenos Aires apartment in a purported suicide. I mean, frankly, nobody believes that. I covered the incident. I was in Buenos Aires when it happened. I covered it for the Daily Telegraph quite extensively. And there is no doubt in my mind that he was assassinated by members. An assassination, I wouldn't say members of the Argentine secret police, the CIDE, I believe it is.
CIDE, yeah, CIDE.
Or that they at least facilitated possibly Iranian or maybe Venezuelan hitmen to come in and assassinate.
Yeah,
make it look like a suicide, and it's never been cleared up. Okay, it's never ever been cleared up.
Very interesting.
One theory I have from an ex-Argentine intelligence officer, a pretty high-level guy, who one time coordinated Argentine counterterrorism with other governments at the foreign ministry. He said that he believes it was a unit within the CIDE that was in the pay, or it was under control of the Venezuelans who did this.
A corrupt CIDE is a principal intelligence of the corruption in Buenos Aires. It's terrible. He protect the governance. He protect the Kirchner and the large money of the Kirchner. It's very, very, very interesting talk about the CIDE. CIDE is the principal intelligence in Buenos Aires. Well, that's very interesting, dear Martin. For conclusion, this podcast, why you think in this moment about it all we talk?
Well, at an international level, I would say that everything points, well, I said before, that the Europeans are pushing for some kind of negotiated solution in Ukraine, and that they may well condition, or maybe get the United States to condition, the vast amount of foreign aid that military aid they're going to give Ukraine on their pursuit of some kind of negotiated settlement with Russia. In fact, in a talk that U.S. Defense Minister Austin had with his Russian counterpart, Defense Minister Shoigu, last week, Austin surprisingly suggested a ceasefire, not a Russian withdrawal, not a capitulation in Ukraine, but to call for a ceasefire as soon as possible. Okay, so it looks like NATO is going in this direction. You've also, of course, heard that Finland and Sweden now want to join NATO. Perhaps that may be conditioned. Turkey is apparently not too happy with that. Turkey is saying that they would agree to admit Finland and Sweden as members, and it has to be unanimous. It has to be by unanimous consent as members of NATO if they would agree to certain conditions. One of them is they stop backing the Kurdish group, but I think Turkey, which has also been pushing for a negotiated settlement, they may well insist also that this may be tied to some kind of agreement by NATO to pursue a negotiated settlement with Russia on Ukraine. So I think that is where things seem to be heading. Again, anything can happen, situation is highly fluid, but that is where things seem to be heading on that score. On the score of transnational crime, that will go ahead. I mean, this seems to be growing. This will grow beyond Ukraine, and a permanently unstable situation in Eastern Europe, where rogue Russian intelligence agents and organized crime figures can continue taking advantage of the highly unstable situation, and perhaps even gain power in Russia as a result of a power struggle in the Kremlin, as Putin's personal power becomes questionable or eroded, is something which we're also likely to see. So, that seems to be where things are headed.
Yes, very interesting analysis for this week with Martin Arostegui. Thank you all, Martin Arostegui. Subscribe to YouTube channel and sharing everything about the international law and international business with Martin Arostegui in this podcast and international law. All. Thank you. See you.
Thank you, Christian. See you next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
See you. Bye.